All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the week 3 Go to Trading. I hope everybody has been enjoying Psychology of Play so far. I think this is a pretty fun week, and hope everybody's been looking forward to it. How's everyone doing so far? Enjoying the class? Doing well? Mixed? Doing well. All right, wonderful. I feel like usually the people who are coming to the Go-To training live, it's usually going well for them. I think it's a little bit more fun to come to these live than it is to listen to the archive version. So thanks everybody for being here. Like I said before, my name's John Morton. There's a picture of me. That is roughly what I look like. I don't have that fancy bow tie on today, but aside from that, that's more or less what I look like. So at this point, we're already in week 3 of Psychology of Play. We've kind of been looking at how play affects us individually. We've talked about our play histories, play personalities, how play affects the brain, how flow and creativity work. So we're ready to look at what happens when we use these strategies on a larger scale. That's part of what we talk about today. We're going to be covering his motivation, self-determination theory, gamification, fun theory, which is just as fun as it sounds, and mixing work and play together. So I hope everybody's excited. If you haven't already, you probably will. You'll hear about Dan Pink. His name comes up a lot. He's a pretty prolific writer, and he has a lot of really interesting stuff to talk about. The workplace, management, all sorts of things kind of covering that topic. So if this is your first introduction to him, cool. Dan Pink is pretty excellent. And his ideas are really interesting. I think that they apply somehow more than I ever would have imagined. A lot of times I am skeptical when I hear about someone who writes a business book or people who are constantly writing, and I'm like, how many times can how much stuff do you have to write about? But I really think I think highly of Dan Pink. So not that my opinion is most important, but I like him. I think he's pretty interesting. So one of the things that we look at is the age that we live in. I'm sure everyone's probably, excuse me, coming from, everyone has a different background. Everyone has different experiences in their lives. We come from a different, pool of ages. I am in my mid-30s. So I come from, this interesting group of a lot of times people will call the analog youth with a digital adulthood. So for me, I see this, the ideas of living in a conceptual age, and Dan Pink talks about that a little bit. Historically it was the age of information. All this information is readily available. Today's society has kind of moved to the conceptual age, and what that means is we're getting the benefits of all the information that's around us all the time. Online learning is a great example of that. Is not only is this information readily available, but with new technologies and even video conferencing, this type of thing is kind of older technology. But I remember as a child, and if you're my age, you might have similar ideas. But right, the idea that you could have a video, call with a friend, was mind-boggling. I was like, oh my goodness, I could have this conversation with someone, and I can see them, and it's, it won't be like, we we aren't, thousands of miles away. And it's funny because now, it's like I'll get FaceTime calls, and I'm like, oh no, I'm not, I'm busy. I got other things going on, and I'm like, but I remember as a kid thinking, wow, if this technology was available, like this would be amazing. And it is, and it's kind of, it's funny, that it's almost, just like, almost we're inconvenienced by it, or like, oh, I'm overwhelmed by how readily available that technology is. So technology is at our fingertips. Information is readily available. We can Google anything we want to know at almost any time. Unless we're in an airplane without wireless. But for the most part, we can pretty much get any information we want at any point in time. Um, we do see a little bit of the flip side of all this is that information has replaced certain jobs. Those that require logical left brain, kind of sequential order. Think kind of about maybe how libraries work traditionally. I remember as a kid, a physical card catalog at the library. And again, this is me showing my age, but you had to go and, like, if you wanted to find a book, you had to go figure out where the book was located through this kind of elaborate card system. And now it's easy. You just type in the book you want. It tells you where it is, and you probably don't even go to the library for it. Yeah, Eric, Dewey Decimal System. That's it. It was this kind of archaic way of cataloging books. But right, machines and software has done some outsourcing in those areas. So that kind of some of the stuff went the way of the dinosaurs. Yeah, Matthew, the card catalogs was like probably my least favorite way to find things. I'm like, I wasn't much of a reader as a kid. I kind of was like, what's a fun book I can find quickly and not have to, think about too much. It was like, a book with trucks. Show me a book with trucks, and I was like, all right, this will work. So what we find out is the skills that actually end up being important right now. So, like, what's really important to people, and an attractive candidate in the workplace has changed. From years ago to now. It really looks different now. What's the absolute most important thing are the characteristics of the brain's right hemisphere. So imagination, creativity, like it says here, big picture thinking, inventiveness, empathy, artistry, all that stuff is really what people are looking for now. Eric, yeah, microfiche. I definitely, a couple of times I had to go look up stuff on that. That was not very much fun. Now it's funny to think about. It's just the internet. Everything is there, readily available to us. But right, currently, what's useful is someone's ability to think outside the box. That's what's important to people, because so much of this, information work is kind of done for us. It's done by machines. These are the new important skills to have in the business world. For all of your industries, you're probably utilizing these skills or developing mastery of these skills, which is what's giving you the advantage. When you get out of school. I talk about this with students every month. I say, when you all walk across the stage at graduation, if you all make it, if you come down for graduation, please do if you can. We love having the opportunity to celebrate our students. But right, you all walk across the stage, and you and your peer group all have the same piece of paper that says, I'm proficient in this. I'm proficient in, graphic design or web development or, software, whatever it is. But what else do we have? What else are we bringing to the table? Oh, that's awesome that you're planning to come to campus, and you might move to Florida and get your master's. That's awesome. This is what separates us. It's the soft skills. It's the what's called an intangible. You can't put your hands on big picture thinking and bring it to somebody. Oh, awesome! Sports broadcast. That's a really exciting new program. But right, inventiveness, even it's you can't quantify it. It's really hard to, sometimes it's even hard to communicate that. It's hard to say, when we go maybe to an interview or we go to talk to people, say, hey, here's some things I want to do. I want to talk to you about my people skills. And a lot of times that takes a demonstration. It takes, a portfolio. It takes project management experience. That's the type of stuff that people are going to want to see. They're going to say, hey, how do you do when you lead a team? How do you do when you're a team member? How do you collaborate well with others? That's the stuff that's going to be important when we leave school, because again, we're all going to leave with a piece of paper that says we're good at doing X. And that's just not very telling for an employer. They say, okay, well, that's good. We have X job to do. But there's other stuff that's also important. So it's something to think about as you move forward in your education. Being good at your skill set is super important. You obviously have to know what you're bringing to the table. But what else do you bring with you is kind of something to keep that in the back of your head as you set out on your journey. Say, all right, well, what else am I bringing to make myself a valuable employee? So then we go to, what actually motivates people. What causes us to perform and achieve at work. We might be surprised that we aren't as predictable as we might have thought. There's definitely some traditional ideas. What would you all say motivates you? Feel free to just jump in the chat box, or if you want to, there's an option to have everyone muted, but I can unmute you if you want to raise your hand and talk. We can do that as well. Eric says, my wife, some laughter, life, learning new things. Okay, that's awesome. Family, that's a huge one for a lot of people. Success. Okay. So we have some ideas, and they're going to be different things. Not everyone is necessarily motivated by the same thing. Some people, my mother, myself, love for sports. Awesome. Learning more. Yeah, no, it's good. I think that we have this concept or that Full Sail, just on the back end from the instructor, staff, faculty side of it about lifelong learning. And yeah, I'll say I'm the first one. I'm always looking to learn something new. My interests, I have interests in psychology, obviously, because I'm here, but I have a lot of interests that relate to gardening and plants, and I keep a lot of weird fruit trees and stuff like that. So I think it's important to always be working on something, always be learning. So historically, there were some ideas about what got people moving. There's the big bonuses, rewards, plus incentives equals employee accomplishments. And this formula might look right to some people. And some people might think, no, not really so much. This isn't really what I feel. What do you think about this as far as money, financial incentive? Is that a motivator for us? Yes or no? You can just type in yes or no if you want. Of course, yes. So yeah, I think that for some people it is. Yeah. Oh, I like how we in the short term, it says sure, I like money. Yes. When it's a bonus, for sure. Okay. So right. money makes the world go around. Yeah, I think that there's something about it. It is a useful tool for us to have. Money helps facilitate a lot of our needs and our wants, and things like that. Fair pay for services, even better. Okay, yeah. Oh, that's all right, Matthew. Don't worry. Um, there's there are some ideas about money being an incentive, and I think that Yeah, right. We talk about money sometimes does equal survival, but it doesn't necessarily equal happiness. I agree. So what what comes down to in a larger spectrum business world, there are a couple misconceptions about why people work and what motivates them. More money, more problems. Yeah. No, absolutely. When it comes to an employee's performance and accomplishments, um, the assumption is that money is going to drive them and make them perform better. Which I think a lot of times people think will be the case. What we find is the secret to motivation. Um, it comes up through Dan Pink. He kind of looks through and shows right what the secrets to high perform what the secret to high performance is. And it's basically doing things for their own sake. And I think that any one of you can probably attest to that. If someone, if you have a project and you want to do it, you're going to do that project. It's something that you're motivated by. It's something that you like. It's something that you want to do, versus someone else telling you to do it. Say, hey, go do this thing. Yeah, Matthew. There's a study done that you read. Yeah, I bet. There's a lot of things to this. So before I move on, I think that anyone, I don't know if anyone has had this experience, but I've had it. I really enjoy painting. I don't do it very often because it's time consuming and it's a lot of work. But if I'm doing it, I really enjoy it. I like doing it. I have a good time. I used to, when I was in college, I would take commission work. I'd say, hey, I need money. You want me to paint things, and I would paint things for people. And a couple commissions in, I realized I really, really didn't like doing commissioned artwork. And what I found was that I liked painting, but I like to paint what I like to paint, and I like to do it on my schedule and in the time that I felt was appropriate. Excuse me. But when I was painting what somebody else wanted painted, I didn't really have a lot of passion for it. And they were paying me, what I thought was fairly well, which it was. But I just really didn't. It didn't. It wasn't the same as if I was just painting what I wanted to paint. Eric says, I've done it for 16 years, but it pays the bills. It feeds your family. Yeah, absolutely. Right. No, 100%. It's right. For me, it was a lack of passion. I needed the money, which is why I took the commissions. I wanted to, be able to support myself. But right, I just wasn't very passionate about it. And that's kind of what was missing for me. It's the type of work where, and right, it somewhat limits my imagination. Crystal, yeah, I agree completely. What we find are the three concepts of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And this is really the key to what motivates us. So autonomy, I'm sure people know more and more about what autonomy means. You think of autonomous cars, so self-driving. So being self-directed is kind of what that means. We don't want to be micromanaged. We want to kind of, we want to blaze our own trail. That's one reason I'm trying to expand my knowledge. Yeah, I want the passion and the excitement back. Yeah, Eric, that's awesome. I'm really glad to hear that. Being self-directed, I think, is one of the first keys to that. Mastery is just what it said. We master something. We want to be good at something. It's very satisfying, to get good at something. Matthew says they offer cash incentive, company lunch, or just an attaboy, job well done to different companies. The one that had the most success was the company that just offered the job well done over the money. Interesting. Okay. So you want to be a sports reporter? Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, we want to be good at stuff. We want to do, we want to be experts in our field. I don't think anyone shows up and says, all right, today I just want to be mediocre. I just want to show up and I want to, give a half effort and, see what comes up. I don't know why, why even bother if we're not going to try hard? And I think that probably is true for a lot of, yeah, some people just, aren't always really interested in trying. And the last one is purpose. And to make it personal is, we can ask all of you, did anyone start their journey at Full Sail and say, I want to get into game design or production or sports marketing or film or whatever it is, and just fly under the radar, go unrecognized, and live live a life of mediocrity. I would venture a guess that no one was really here for that. No one no one came here because they wanted to just be medium at things. Everyone wants to be awesome. Um, I some people might, but I think that on the whole, most people are very much interested in being the best that they can be. Yeah, you're saying no such thing as being a pro, always having opportunity to learn. Absolutely. I think that you can still be your best without being in the limelight. I don't think you need fame, um, but you can still want to be your best at something. I think everyone is probably has a level of satisfaction, um, from knowing that they're doing their best, and I think that that's important. Um, so, question to all of you is did these three things come into your mind when picking out your school or career? Did the ideas of autonomy, mastery, and purpose, whether or not you knew the words for them, whether or not those were the what you said and what you picked, did that come to mind? Were you thinking, hey, I want to be self-directed, I want to be able to kind of pave my own path, I want to be my best at something, and I want to feel purpose, I want to feel a sense of purpose for why I'm going to school for for as long as you're here, or moving into your career? I hope that most of you can answer yes to those. It might not necessarily have been things that we thought about. Eric says, honestly, mine are financially driven, but also realizing um, autonomy and relatedness. Yeah, okay. Want to be a sportscaster and never had a course till now. Yeah, I mean, hey, I'm glad to hear that. It's good to know that you have a path and you're able to take it. That's really important. What would you all say motivates you? And feel free if you wanna if you wanna share, you wanna talk a little bit about that. Is there like a project that you want to work on, something that you're like, this is the thing, this is the I imagine Geraldo. I'm the worst at this. What you said, kind of being able to do commentary at big events sounds like a huge motivator for you. I think that's important. Anyone else have things specifically that stick out that motivate them? Oh, okay, here we go. We actually have direct contact people and devs at Studio, Wildcard, and sponsored MOD. Okay, that's awesome. Love for gaming is what motivated you to game design. Matthew, I have a hard time thinking my work is good. I always play, and the thing I could have done different is, oh, it's a push just to hear that you're doing well. Awesome. Game mods, okay. So everyone has kind of something that motivates them, something that is driving them. I think those things are really important to think about. Keep them close at hand. A lot of times it's very easy to get, kind of overwhelmed with school, but remembering what motivates you is one of the things that will get you through that. Christian, well, there's obvious extrinsic motivators, but the school was for me all inner and my passion. Okay, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. So has everyone seen The Candle Problem? Have you come across that? Yes. Gerardo, yes. Yeah, yes, okay. It was in the reading. Okay, yes, there we go. Wonderful. You are ahead of the game, my friend. For many people have not yet done the reading, I imagine. So I'm glad that you did. I'm going to go through it real quick with everyone, just because I think that the candle problem is really interesting. So this is an experiment by psychologist Carl Dunker. And participants were tasked with fixing a lit candle on a wall in a way so that the candle wax wouldn't drip onto the table below, using only a box of matches, a box of thumbtacks, or a lighter they used in a more modern, up-to-date version of the experiment. Reading is awesome. I agree. So basically, what the idea is that people, if you're presented with this, eventually you, in an ideal world, come to the deduction that you should dump the tacks out of the box, tack the box to the wall, put the candle in the box, and light the candle. So for this experiment, there were two test groups. One was called the low drive group, and they were told that the study was, just there to test problem solving and to see which group would be best for a later experiment. They were offered no prize, and that's why they were called the low drive group, because they were given no incentive to do this. Then there was what Junker called the high drive group, and they were told that depending on how quickly they solve the problem, they can win money, and that only the top 25% would win the cash prize. So basically, there was a limited resource on the table, and effectively a sense of competition. Does anyone have any ideas about which group finished faster? If you already read the reading, you probably know which group finished faster. Yes, it is. It's the low drive group. You're absolutely correct. What they found, is that when rewards were offered, it took on average 3 minutes longer to solve the problem. Yes, the one without the cash, the no cash group, the one's not given any incentive, and they were intrinsically motivated. Whether or not, sure, yeah, they were, because there was no external motivation. What they found, a couple things. We have our Not All About the Benjamins, which is another Puff Daddy and Taurus B.I.G. Reference, which I like a lot. But what they found, right? Yes, Christian. Extrinsic were slower. until the tasks were taken out of the box. Correct. What they found was that the process of turning the task into a competition for a limited resource created a mild level of stress in the subject participants who were in the group. And when the subject is under this type of stress, the fight or fight response starts to kick in, even at a very mild level, and it starts taking over the brain. And basically, it created a thinking and problem-solving gap. It's in the prefrontal cortex, and basically gets shut down. It says, "Uh-oh, I'm stressed." Your brain, sends signals that there's danger, there's limited resource, we need to conserve, figure this out, and it shuts down the problem-solving part of your brain. And what it basically ends up proving is, or demonstrating, is that rewards can narrow focus and restrict possibilities. And that's kind of the Matthew, exactly. The focus is not the task at hand. The focus becomes the limited resource. And even if you're otherwise fine, the idea of a limited resource, the idea of stress, can be introduced from outside, and can shut down our problem solving abilities. So it's a pretty interesting idea. What they also found is that it goes kind of both ways in either direction. There really is a time and a place for rewards, and basically what they found out is that if a task is mechanical, like working on an assembly line, then incentives and rewards do work, even if they're kind of like a limited amount type of thing. And they redid this experiment where they took the tasks out of the box and they just set them on the table and they said, "Hey, figure this out." And people very quickly, took the tasks, tacked the box to the wall. They figured it out. The task inside or outside of the box was kind of the issue. What we overcome in this is what's called functional fixedness. And functional fixedness in the candle problem is the idea that the tack box can only be used as a box for tacks. We've got a fixed idea of what that box is for. And overcoming functional fixedness requires higher level thinking. So that higher level thinking is what goes on in the prefrontal cortex, and the stress shuts that down. So when we need to do problem solving, it's probably not great for those type of incentives to people. But if it's just assembling widgets on the assembly line, fine, go ahead, give the best widget assembler, the person who assembles them fastest or the most, or however you want to make that award, give those people incentives and rewards. It works well for them. So that's kind of where you can use it one way or the other. Businesses would really benefit from knowing when to dangle the rewards and when not. The real kicker is that businesses need to pay people enough to take the issue of money off the table, and because that's fostering an environment of limit I'm sorry. When you take the idea of money off the table, people aren't hung up on limited resources. They end up being considerably more creative, and the returns are a lot better. We intrinsically know this. When we're paid well, it communicates that we're valued and important members of a team, and that people value our expertise. They say, "Hey, this person's important. I want them to do well. I want them to perform well for me." And I think if anyone's ever had a job, and maybe you've had one and maybe you haven't, but if you had a job where you felt like you're like, "Man, I'm really getting paid well, I'm being compensated well," you probably tried a lot harder at that job. You said, "Hey, man, I'm really going to give this my all. I want to keep this job. I want to keep doing this." And they clearly, they value what I'm doing here, and that's important. So yeah, it rolls us right into self-determination theory. Self-determination theory is not dissimilar from what we were talking about earlier, but self-determination theory explains human behavior from a completely different angle than traditional behavioral theories. It says that we're wired towards personal growth, that we're motivated intrinsically, from within, and our self-determination basically forms who we are as people. When our needs are satisfied, we're motivated, we're productive, and we're happy. So, when our needs for autonomy, mastery, and purpose, or I believe it's a slightly different example for self-determination theory. But when our needs are met, when we're fulfilled, we're going to do much better work. Google exemplifies how businesses and employers can benefit from using the principles of self-determination theory. But we'll get into that a little bit later as we move forward. I'm going to take a drink of my water real quick, so please forgive me. So, right. Competence, autonomy, and relatedness are the counterpoints that come with self-determination theory. So just kind of to have that in mind, it's not autonomy, mastery, and purpose, but they're incredibly similar. Competence, autonomy, and relatedness. Has anyone heard about gamification? At least before you read the readings? Nope. Okay. Anyone else? Nope. Okay. Fair enough. Stemming from self-determination theory is the idea of gamification. Not until the readings. Yeah, a lot of people have seen some sort of concept around it, but maybe haven't known what it's called. So that's pretty standard. Gamification strategically implements fun. That's kind of the idea. They're adding fun into stuff. It creates an environment of engagement and motivation. So gamification techniques really strive to leverage people's desire for achievement and for self-expression. We have an article titled "The 26 Elements of Gamification Marketing Strategies" listed in the readings on gamification, so feel free to check those out. But right, kind of as some insight, you think about any sort of marketing tool, more often than not, is what we see, that uses some sort of reward, points, badges, leaderboards, things like that end up getting you to consume more, interact more, whatever it is. We see gamification everywhere. What experiences have any of you all had with gamification to get you interested or engaged in products? Is there anything specific in your experiences, or anything personally or professionally? Uber uses it. Okay, how does Uber use it? I'm curious to know. I don't use Uber, so I'm not entirely sure how they're using it, but I'm curious. If you want, I can unmute you. If that's helpful. Oh, badges and incentives. Okay, perfect. All right, Christian, I unmuted you. Are you there? Maybe your microphone's not working. Yourself muted. Unmute yourself. Maybe. Any luck? We can come back to that. Anyone else? Anyone who you see using gamification? One of the big ones that I see, or one of the ones I've thought about, is McDonald's. McDonald's is really good at this. You're fine. Okay. It lets you know your progress as well. No, I'm sorry. Like I was saying, McDonald's does this with McDonald's Monopoly. Every year, it's hey, we've got this thing. You can win these prizes. You get these game pieces, and really, they just want you to buy food. They want you to keep buying items that have game pieces on them. Whatever it is, and yeah, I mean they've gamified the food buying process. They've said, "Hey, buy this." They did it for kids when they made Happy Meals initially. They said, "Hey, buy this, but also you get a toy." Okay, Amazon and their sweepstakes every day. Sure, yeah, that's a great example of it. I don't know if anyone uses the map app Waze. But that's another one that's pretty interesting. They use, yeah, Matthew has, right. But basically, if you enter real time data into the Waze app, you get badges and points and things like that, which is compelling for a lot of people. They say, hey, and I'll give it to Waze and say that they're doing it for kind of to make their app better, to make their real time information better. So I really have to say they're doing it in what I'd say is a fairly responsible way, assuming that they're not encouraging people to be on their phones while they're driving, which hopefully they're not. This happens everywhere, though. I think it happens so much more in marketing than I'd like to see. Okay, yeah. Basically, right. Being able to earn points for browsing and get gift cards. Yeah, sure. That's a great example. I think a lot of people are basically, a lot of companies are saying, hey, we'll trade you, some good or item for your data, or for your personal preferences, or for your input. They want to engage us, or get us to do business with them, and they're trying to make it fun. So anytime you see something like that, I would say, hey, I acknowledge that it's gamification, and then I'd say weigh it out. Is it is it something that you want to engage in? Is it something that you actually think is fun? And do you want to, be aware that it's transactional? I guess is really the big thing. Kind of keep that in the back of your head, that it's transactional. There's a really fun example of gamification in the piano staircase. I'm sure some of you have probably seen the video, but if you haven't, we'll go into it. If you go into the materials drop down, there's a little button that says piano staircase. Just click that and it'll load up a video. I'll give everyone a few minutes to watch that, and I'll come back when it's done. So I think that's a really fun example of gamification, basically saying, hey, yeah, if you've seen it before, it's a fairly popular video. Um, I think it's a pretty interesting idea. If you present people with a fun option, even if it means more physical exertion, whatever, you can get people to change their behavior by making it a fun option. And I think that that's really a good example of gamification. I think it's a way to kind of disrupt the normal, how everything goes day in, day out, and get people to, make what is effectively a healthier decision. So I like it. I think the piano staircase is kind of a cool example of that. Um, So for the last part of this, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the companies who, kind of go out of their way. Um, they've really done a pretty good job incorporating play into what they've done. But we'll see, right? Gamification ingrained in the work culture of companies who are beating out, their competition. The companies are doing a pretty good job creating the appropriate conditions for people so that they'll motivate themselves. Basically, getting people to work smarter and not harder. These companies are the leaders in their industries because they really push the boundaries of where play ends and where work begins. It's something you'll see a little bit. I think even more with Google. There's one more video on the material section again. It's called Inside Google. If you want to click it, it gives you a quick little look at what Google looks like. But check it out, and when it's over, we'll come back and I'll catch up with you about it. Alrighty, I like that video. I think it's an interesting kind of just a view into what's going on at some of the companies that are doing new and interesting things. They're kind of making their workplaces a little bit more fun, or a lot more fun. I feel like generally speaking, Google does a really good job about having a fun environment. They spend a lot of time, effort, resources, making sure that people enjoy where they work and they like being there. Creating an environment of creativity and imagination leads to higher efficiency, performance, and happiness with employees. Although it's counterintuitive to traditional thinking, um, motivation and human behavior are just going to be increased when we're in fun environments. People are going to be happier to be there. Motivation goes up. We're just happier when we're in an environment that we like. We can do better work. And companies have figured it out. They've said, hey, you know what, we can be an innovative leader. We're willing to try out different stuff. We're willing to kind of go counter to what traditional thinking has told us. We're working closer and closer into, how we're getting these results. We're doing it by, non-traditional work environments. We're doing it by making this a fun place to be. People appreciate that. They feel, they feel cared about. They feel valued, and they do great work. So right, those are some things that really end up, making people shine within their workplace. So this week you'll learn a lot about the value of play on a larger level, but everything can be applied to you as an individual as well. Determining what motivates you from inside out will help you along your journey and really help you be, the best person that you can be. So I'd encourage everyone to kind of take that time and think about that, and think about, what is that makes you the best person you can be. So there we go. That's what we were talking about today. At least in this half of the go-to training. And there are the references. I'm going to take a break. I'd say let's all come back at 5 after. So about take 9 minutes. If you need to get a drink, use the restroom, whatever you need to do. And then we'll be back for the second half of the go-to training. Thanks everybody for sticking around for the second half of the go-to training. I'm still John Morton, still hanging out with me. Exciting, fun times. We're going to talk about collaboration and team building. I think that everyone, it's interesting, like being in an online program. I think probably most of you are in the online program. A few of you might be in delayed start schedules for campus programs. But in any case, it's pretty interesting. If you inevitably at some point in your education, you will end up doing work on teams. In our campus class, we have some team activities that we do. They don't lend themselves as well to online, but inevitably you're going to be working in teams in the online program at some point. Not necessarily in this class, but in the future it will come up. So and even otherwise, I think it's some, we always end up working on a team, whether it's in our workplace, whether it's at home. Working with a team is important. Has everyone at some point heard talk about synergy? I feel like it's a word that gets thrown around a lot and doesn't always get explained particularly well. Has everyone heard of it? And I guess really, can anyone give me what they think is a good description of synergy? Feel free to just chime in. There's a hand raising button. If you want to raise your hand, I can unmute you and you can chat. Anyone want to tackle that? Christian, you've heard it, but please explain. I absolutely will. I want to just give anybody an opportunity if you want to jump in. It's in a song. Probably. I don't know. Maybe it could be. That's that's not where we're going for. Oh, okay. The Lonely Island song. All right, I'll have to check it out. Center place from where all energy flows. Not for our purposes. It's synergy is it's a collaborative effort, and basically what synergy means is people are all working together, and the overall outcome that they're able to produce collectively is greater than the sum of their parts. Yeah, so it's an interaction. It can be between two people, but a lot of times it's multiple people all working together. Yep, it's like collaborative flow, exactly. So right again, working together to produce something that is greater than the sum of its parts. So I think that's really what separates it. So if you kind of took everyone and measured them individually, you said, okay, I can produce this and I can produce this. We end up with a greater overall result when we're all working together. And it happens, and it's kind of synergy is what needs to happen for, really for any project to get done. You think about anything that we do, and we need different people to step in and work on stuff. If you have a room full of directors, that might be great, but you need camera operators, you need sound technicians, you need all these other people for a movie to get made. You can have a team full of developers, but if you don't have an artist, your app or program that you write is probably not going to look great. We end up needing to work together on a pretty regular basis. Some people are like, yeah, that's great, I love teamwork. And some people are terrified and they're sitting quietly, kind of in the corner saying, oh no, I don't want to do teamwork, I want to be by myself. And it's fine wherever you are with it. I think there's a piece of it that just says, hey, I need to acknowledge how I feel about teamwork. Teamwork makes the dream work, Jonathan says. I don't disagree. But right, it's going to come up whether or not you like it. Group dynamics, at least according to the Tuckman and Jensen model, look roughly like this. You go through these stages of team development. The forming stage is the beginning stage. Everyone kind of meets each other. I'm sure everyone's had this. First day of class, first day of practice. Something along those lines. You meet people. You start saying, "Oh, what are you into? What do you like? Here are the things I'm interested in." You start figuring out how you all fit together, what your roles are, and what you can all contribute to a group project. A lot of times we hit the storming stage just after that, where maybe we have different ideas. Maybe we say, hey, I think I really like this thing. And someone else says, well, I really like this other thing. So there's conflict, it's pretty natural. It's a normal thing to have happen. We hit some conflict, and we hopefully can weather the storm. And make it through into the norming stage, where we all start to figure out what our role is within the group and say, hey, I'm really great at doing X, Y, and Z, and you're good at doing these other things. And we all start figuring out what our roles are and how we work best within the group. As we get working better and better, we hit the performing stage, where we're all kind of a well-oiled machine. We say, hey, we know our role, we know what we're supposed to be doing. This works great. We all work well together until our project is done, or our season is over, or whatever our group was formed for comes to an end, and we hit the adjourning stage, where we all kind of go our separate ways. The team disbands. Then maybe it comes back together, and maybe it doesn't. But these are the stages of group development. So what are the things that we have come to expect when we heard about Full Sail, when we decided we were going to come to Full Sail? What are some of the norms, some of the things that you were told to expect about the school, about the experience? I imagine technology was probably around the forefront of it. You were probably given some warnings about workload, course load. Okay, yeah, Aaron says it was more of a creative experience. Absolutely, I would tend to agree and say that we do have the experience here is definitely a more creative one when compared to a traditional university. Absolutely, 100%. I agree. Building portfolios, yeah, that's a huge one. Practical hands-on learning is definitely a big part of it. Absolutely. Well, hopefully you were told about working with others and kind of how some of that works. Because realistically, that's going to be a big part of things. Um, Working with others a lot of time means some form of conflict. And I don't want everyone to, immediately think, oh no, conflict, that's horrible, that's bad. That's not the case. Conflict, when I say it, what I really just mean is that, you think one thing and I think another. That's conflict right there. You say, hey, I think that, the highway is the best way to go. And I say, hey, I think surface streets are the best way to go. We're at odds with one another. Sometimes we can prove it, sometimes we can figure it out, sometimes we're going to debate it, sometimes we're going to really be at odds and really be stuck. But right, it doesn't mean that we need to completely walk away. John says debate can bring about greater ideas and solutions, constructive conflict. Yeah, exactly. um, what ends up happening, for a lot of places, is conflict can end up being a costly thing. Um, it can be, and oftentimes is associated with emotional fatigue, absenteeism, and turnover, especially when it goes unresolved. That's kind of one of the big ones when we are just left at odds and we say, "Oh, I just don't like this." It's very easy to fall into these things. I'm sure everyone at some point, whether it was in school or with maybe a extracurricular activity we had some sort of conflict in. Maybe we skipped it. Maybe we didn't like a coach we had and we stopped being on that team, or we weren't enjoying a conflict we had with a peer and maybe we missed some school as a result of it. It's pretty normal that happens. um, but in an ideal world, people will be able to move past their conflict in a way that doesn't keep them from living their lives. That's really what I'd hope for everyone as they move past this class, is that conflict doesn't stand in the way of you meeting your goals in life. So some misconceptions we have about conflict is that conflict is bad and should be avoided. Not necessarily. If I have if my wife really likes cooking and she really likes using turmeric and I really don't like turmeric, I can say, hey, well, I really don't like this. And she can say, too bad. I make the food and you'll eat it or you'll starve. Or she'll say, hey, thanks for letting me know. I'll stop using so much turmeric in my cooking. Um, but until I get that on the table, I'm sitting there bent out of shape about something. Um, so right, it's important to at least address that. I don't have to just avoid it and pretend like it's not an issue for me. Um, the idea that conflict represents a misunderstanding or a breakdown in communication is another big one. It was like the what I was saying before, about the highway versus surface streets debate. I understand, hey, you really think that the highway is the way to go. And, I think that surface streets are the way to go. We're both clear. We both explained our points. The speed limit's higher on the highway and there's traditionally less traffic. And, the surface streets are better paved and better maintained. Whatever it is, we can both be fully self-expressed in a conflict or an argument or whatever it is that we're going through, and have we haven't miscommunicated. We've both been clear on things, but we still kind of are still entrenched in our opinion. That can be all right. And the last one is that all conflict can be resolved to everyone's satisfaction. Not always the case. Again, my wife can say, "Sorry, John, I'm going to keep cooking the way that I like to cook, and you can eat or you can starve, and I can eat or I can starve, and those are my options." I might not be happy with the way that our conflict has been resolved, but it gets resolved. It says, "Hey, look, I'm not going to change this thing," and I say, "Okay, well, that's that. I guess I can't control how another person acts." So right, not conflict won't always be resolved to everyone's satisfaction, which love it or hate it, that's kind of the way that it goes. That's when grit comes into play. Jonathan says, "Yeah, no, it absolutely is." So there's a handful of ways that we deal with people when we work in a group. There's a few kind of images and ideas that go along with them, which we're going to go through. Jonathan, I knew what you meant. Not grits, just grit, singular. I got it. So right, we have a competing personality. This person tends to be assertive and uncooperative. They tend to say my way or the highway. A lot of times this person gets their way, but doesn't have a big fan base. It's just one of the many ways that things go. Sometimes people just go along because they would prefer someone who's assertive than someone who's not. I know that's one of those questions. It seems like people there's always a meme about that where it's, "What do you want for dinner?" "I don't know. What do you want?" And it goes back and forth. And I'll tell you that I always know what I want for dinner, and a lot of times my wife is not going to go along with that, and I ask her, and we do end up in that loop where I don't know, but I want something. Now I'm too hungry to think about it. Sometimes I would, sometimes right, one of us just being a little assertive can be helpful in that way. Meatloaf. There you go, Dunstan. I always want pizza from this one pizza place in town. There's actually 2 locations, but I always want pizza from the same pizza place. It's pretty much my favorite thing. The accommodating personality. So this person tends to be unassertive, but they're cooperative. They go along to get along. They tend to, kind of be maybe a little bit soft-spoken. They're maybe not real willing to put their wants, needs, desires out there, and they just kind of go along. They get what life gives them. Again, for a lot of people, they say, "Hey, I'd rather just kind of go with the flow. I might not always get exactly what I want, but I'm going along, and there's not a lot of conflict in my life, and that's how I want my life to be." Which again, nothing wrong with it. It's just one of the many ways that we are in dealing with people. We have the avoiding personality. This person is unassertive and also uncooperative. I feel like this describes a lot of kind of maybe obstinate teenagers, or at least me as an obstinate teenager. I have no opinion, but I hate everything. This person can be the invisible group member. you don't be this person in a group. If you're not happy and you're not willing to do anything about it, it can be really difficult to deal with a person like this. So I'll say, if you run into this situation, hopefully you can nudge that person a little bit into maybe being a little bit more cooperative. But it can definitely be a difficult group member to deal with. Then we have compromising. This person is moderate in both assertiveness and cooperativeness. They say, hey, I've got some ideas. Here's what I think. I'm also willing to, kind of go along if you have some ideas. They want to make deals. They want something to happen. They want progress. And then we have the collaborating person. This person is both highly assertive and highly cooperative. So they say, hey, I really want to get together. I want to work hard. I want to make things happen. They're probably the type of person who says, hey, if you bring them an idea, you say, hey, I have this idea. And they say, yeah, let's take it and let's run with it. They very much want action. They want to see something happen. And they're also, very willing to, take up another person's idea and champion that idea and run with it. The breakdown looks something like this, where unassertive to assertive is measured on this axis, and then uncooperative to cooperative is measured here. I think that it's important to know where you fall, and you might not fall exactly in one of these places. You might fall around the middle. Excuse me. It's just important to kind of have some awareness about that. Have some awareness about where you fall, and kind of think about that when you work with other people. Where do they fall in this? How are they? How are they working? Who works well together? What's kind of the best path forward? When we're working in a group, a lot of times we use brainstorming. I think that brainstorming is a really great way to get things done, to kind of get ideas out there. It's really important to be all-inclusive in brainstorming. The idea that quality counts. You want to get good ideas out of something. You want to, have people bring, great stuff to the table. It means that there's some things we probably shouldn't do. Like, we probably shouldn't judge other people's ideas. Somebody might have, maybe every third idea they have is brilliant. But if you shut them down for their first two ideas that maybe weren't as great, they're never going to get to the third one. It's tough sometimes. It's tough to share your ideas, especially if you don't feel like they're resonating with people. But you might have some really great stuff, or you might have a team member who has really great ideas and has really great solutions, but for one reason or another hasn't gotten them out yet. So it's important to let people talk and to be open and not judge, and especially not give people a hard time if their ideas maybe aren't what you would have thought of or aren't what you think are the best ideas. Write everything down, to the best of your ability. Sometimes people are shouting things out quickly. It's difficult to do, but if you can, keep as good a notes as you can during brainstorming sessions, or have everyone keep a little bit of notes on their own, that could be nice. Don't be afraid to build on other people's ideas. This is one of those ones where the collaborators really come in and they say, hey, you've got, half of a good idea, or you might have a quarter of a good idea. There's this one thing that's awesome about, your plan or your idea. Let's take that and let's build on it, and this, I would say, do it in as kind of way as you can, but someone might just have, 2/3 of a good idea. They might have a really great plan. My favorite example, is you might have this person who maybe they're great at making pizza, and they've got, these great pizza ovens, and they're like, all right, they've got a great pizza recipe, and it's awesome. They've got the pizza down. and they've got a great restaurant and a cool location, and it's really popular. But then they want to deliver the pizzas on unicycles. And you can, you can go to a person like that and be like, hey, look, you have great pizza. You know, your pizza's delicious. The ovens work great. The location's perfect. But there's this one part, this unicycle delivery. I just don't think it's going to work. That's okay. It's okay. Someone might have a part of their idea might not be the best, and it's okay to say, hey, I really love these two other parts of your idea. You might just leave out the part that you think unicycle delivery is a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea. I'm telling you right now, but you don't need to tell that person. When it just probably won't get included, and they'll move forward, and they'll be happy that the other parts of their idea are involved. So right, don't be afraid to build on another person's idea. Finding group flow. This is one that can be challenging, but there are definitely some tips to getting there with that. Setting clear goals for your group. If your group just says, hey, let's just hang out and talk about stuff until we figure something out, that meeting's going to get sidetracked. You're going to get derailed. It's probably not going to go that well. Ahead of time when you're planning a meeting, say, hey, let's figure out a direction. Let's figure out, one or two things that we definitely need to get figured out before the end of the meeting. And you go and you have that meeting, and you figure out those few things, and then you take that and you work on it again, and then you come back. You set time for another meeting. You say, okay, let's come back for another meeting and bring back what we took away. Practicing deep listening. This is one that sometimes might take a little bit of training. There's some exercises you can do for deep listening. What I'd encourage you to do, and one of the best practices I've seen, is when you listen to someone, they tell you something, and you paraphrase it back to them. So you say it back to them, conveying the same idea but using different words. And what ends up happening is when you do this, a lot of times you might say, "Oh no, what I actually meant was this. I think you may have misunderstood this one thing." And because you didn't use the same words to retell it back to them, you're able to figure out that wasn't exactly what they meant. And it shows that you've been paying attention to that person. They say, wow, okay, this person knows what I'm talking about. We're on the same page. Yes. And you can move forward. It avoids a lot of confusion in the long run. And it's good practice to use. Keep moving it forward. The whole idea of yes and. Say, hey, we got this idea. Okay, that's awesome. Well, yeah, that and what else? Keep moving forward. It's easier to say yes and it doesn't derail or kind of slow a conversation down the same way that saying no does. Yes and may mean no. Like, yes, that's an interesting idea, and what else are we going to do? But if you talk to somebody in that part, you just keep getting no's. I think anyone who's done that enough times has probably had that experience. If you keep getting told no, it's a really tough way to keep a conversation moving. It's hard for a person to keep coming back from no, and want to stay engaged in a conversation with you. So keep that keep that in the back of your head. Yes and. Complete concentration. Put your phones away if you're in a meeting with people. Whatever other distraction device you have, your laptops, if you don't need them up. If you do need them up, use your laptops. But don't have Facebook up. Don't have, the other things up. It really is difficult to have an effective meeting while you're doing a lot of other stuff. Your retention's probably going to be lower. So just kind of something to think about. The control paradox is another interesting one. Individual control versus deferring to the emergent flow of the group. I think everyone's been in a group before at some point where they felt like someone was really trying to force the group in a certain direction. And maybe the group goes with it, but I feel like at a certain point in time, the group just stops going along with that. And you can see someone, they're trying to control something and they want it to happen in a certain way. And they end up kind of, either getting upset because the group's not going the way that they want them to go, or they kind of get trampled by the group because the group says, I'm not, that's not how, we're going to go. So, kind of keep that in mind. If you're that person and you really feel like you want to control the group, maybe reevaluate that and say, hey, maybe I'll see what the group wants to do as a whole, and go from there. blending egos is a tough one. I wish I could say it's easy and fun, but it's a challenge. Learning to get people to mesh well together, not step on one another's toes. Be able to, step in and out of roles as our skill sets dictate, instead of just saying, hey, I think I'm the best, so I'm going to do everything. It's a challenge and it's tough, so be prepared for it. Equal participation is a huge one. Most time in schools, an instructor will say, okay, tell us who, if let us know who did work on this or whatever. I would encourage everyone, to the best of your ability, to be involved at a level that is you seem eager to get work in. And what I'll say about this is you might find you might find that what you're really interested in doing is not what the rest of the group wants to do if you're splitting a group project up. I realized this at a certain point in time. There's things that I really like working on that other people don't like working on. And similarly, there's the things that I don't like working on that other people do. But if you're eager and you say, hey, here's what I'm really interested in working on, here's what I like to do with a group project, it means that you're going to get a role in the group, and hopefully you'll get a role that you like in the group, because you're proactive about seeking something out. Where a lot of times, if you kind of sit on your thumbs and you say, oh, I'll just see what's left over at the end, you end up with a task that maybe you're not that thrilled about doing. And you might just kind of sit and do a mediocre work because you're not that into it. The idea that familiarity breeds contentment is another big one. Sometimes we get a little too friendly with people. We say, oh, it's friend time, it's fun time, when really it's work time. This is a big one, especially if, not everyone in the group is friends on the same level. And so people will say, hey, it's really time to get this work done. Can we please stop, horsing around? I get that we're buddies and whatever, but let's get this work done. So keep that in mind. Value everybody's time. Communicate. It's huge. It's important. Make sure that you're doing it. And harness the group's fear of failure. The potential that you'll fail is real in a group. Sometimes people need to be motivated a little bit by the fact that they're worried that hey, we need to do good in this if we want to get a good grade. It's really important sometimes to remember that. This is the same thing that we were going over. So the key is finding right balance. The most effective business teams balance these tensions in the same way. They listen closely, they're concentrated on the task, they communicate openly so that everyone gets immediate feedback, and they trust that genius will emerge from the group, not from any one member. When that happens, groups find flow, and with it comes more effective team participation and greater innovation. I think that's kind of just what we went over, but written out in a paragraph form. It's all kind of easier said than done stuff. Unfortunately, I wish it was it's easy and here's how to do it. Implementing these things in the real world are challenging. I'd encourage everyone to screenshot some of this stuff. Go back. It's in the readings, but really think about this. And when you come up to a team assignment, stop and say, hey, are we doing X, Y, and Z things? Like maybe even keep a running team charter, or a template for a team charter. Hey, as a team, we want to do X, Y, and Z things when we work together, and make sure that kind of some of the ideas for finding group flow are part of that team charter. That way, everyone can come in and say, hey, look, we all signed on for this, and here's what we're doing. So just something to kind of have in your back pocket. What if your group members all fall in the avoidance category? What do you do? If your entire group is avoiding work, I'd probably reach out to your instructor and say, hey, here's what's happening. I might give the group an ultimatum and say, hey, look, we all need to get on this task. Maybe even make assignments for them. But I'd probably talk with your instructor and just say, hey, can you give me some direction or some feedback? Every now and then I've had students who asked to join different groups, and they said, hey, my group isn't active, isn't participating. What can I do? Can I join a different group? And I've let people do that. It doesn't bother me when people do that. I'd rather see someone work hard and be in a group with other people who are working hard than try to, steer an aimless group. So there's always options. Some people I've had students who requested to work on things as individuals. I've usually honored those requests. So there's options. If you're in a workplace and it's like this, I'd probably talk to your boss. I think beginning a session with a 5-minute mindfulness exercise helps. Yeah, absolutely. Doing mindfulness exercises at the beginning of group meetings, 100%. I think that's a great idea. So another thing when we're looking to, kind of gain deeper understanding, we're looking for resolution. Asking others is a huge part of what goes into that, and there's images that kind of lend themselves to that. And the first one is just old people. You find someone who's older than you, 10 years older than you, 20 years older than you, 50 years older than you, and you ask them, kind of pose some of the questions that you have to them about how to resolve an issue. It's likely they're going to have slightly different ideas. I remember when I was a kid, I had this old, grandpa guy who lived next door to me. He wasn't my grandpa, but he was a grandpa, and I hung out with him, and he was real cool. And he was always building stuff, always doing woodworking projects. And I remember sitting with him and watching him. And the way he would build things, he was really good at it and had great carpentry skills. But I remember sitting and watching and always thinking wow, that's not how I would have thought this was built. If I was building this, I just assumed it was done this way. So he always had really interesting, his techniques were always very interesting. And, they were probably just legitimate carpentry techniques that I was unaware of. So if you ever have the opportunity or you have someone in your life who's a little bit older, talk to them about stuff, see how they do things differently than you do. Another one is children. You come into a tough question or a situation maybe you haven't gotten all the perspective on. And if there is a child in your life, ask them. Just say, hey, what do you think about this? And they may very well give you, some really interesting perspective on an issue, maybe one that you hadn't considered before. Oh, Matthew, woodworking is one of your career outlets. That's awesome. I feel like I've read that at some point in something that you've submitted. I'd love to see some of your woodworking projects, though. That'd be awesome. If you ever want to shoot those to me in a message, I'd be curious to see them. I'm crocheting a basket weave book bag. Well, listen, that's awesome. Very cool. Yeah. That's awesome. Everyone's got a little fun side project. That's really cool. I'm glad to hear that. Very nice. The last one is people from different cultures. It's funny. I remember hearing this story when I was a kid, and it was about a teacher who had gone. They had moved. They lived. I don't remember where, but somewhere in the U.S. in the continental U.S. And they moved to Alaska, and they were doing a play, and the play was about, I want to say it was about the reindeer or Christmas. And when they would do the play, they would get the kids, and they'd go get these sticks from this one particular type of tree. And don't ask me what type of tree it was, because I don't remember. And they'd use the sticks as antlers. And when the teacher went up to Alaska, she was like, okay, well, I need these sticks for this. And they said, well, those trees don't grow here. And the teacher was like, oh, that's terrible, because every year I do this play and I use these, and the kids get to use them for antlers. And the person they were talking to was like, oh, well, in that case, like, I know there's a herd of reindeer here in Alaska that shed their antlers every year. We can just go get real reindeer antlers. And not that Alaska's this crazy different culture, but it's one of those things where their solution was so obvious and easy and upfront, but the person wouldn't have realized it without talking to a person who that was their native place. That's where they were from. So, kind of just like an interesting little aside. I probably butchered that story. If the person who told it to me was here, they'd be like, you didn't tell that story exactly right. But, right. Similarly, problem solving in other cultures is definitely an interesting thing to look at. Erica, that's cool that you're moderating forums. That's very exciting. I will happily check those out. Mind mapping, another great technique. It's a really interesting way. Some people do this way. Some people do it with sticky notes or kind of thought bubbles or mind web, kind of diagrams. But however that's useful for you, getting your ideas out. You can look up mind mapping techniques and go through that. Whatever works for you. If you find something that works, stick to it. That's what I tell people, all the time is if you find techniques that work for you, roll with them. Free writing is another one that's pretty useful. I found free writing to be especially helpful for me in just kind of like dealing with personal stuff. Sometimes, I can write stuff more easily than I could think it and say it. Somehow when I write it, it's easier to do. It takes less of an emotional toll. I don't know for sure exactly what it is, but I think free writing can be really useful. Similarly, not just for personal stuff, but for work things. You can write about a topic, an idea, something that you want to talk about, discuss more. It can be definitely a useful technique in figuring out where you want to go, especially if you're not quite sure. If you just have the beginning of an idea, start writing about it and see where it takes you. Word association is also another big one. You say a word and the person says the word that brings up in them, and you kind of go back and forth. I think that's a really interesting way. Marketing does this all the time, but I think it's pretty interesting. It might not be a bad habit or practice to get into, especially if you're working with a group and you're trying to get, ideas flowing. So that's the end of the second half of the go-to training. Does anyone have any questions, comments, anything that you've been wondering about, anything that we haven't covered, anything that we kind of briefly talked about that you have deeper questions on, or any questions about assignments for the week? Nope. Okay, well, if you don't have any questions, I'm not gonna hold you. You're free to go. You can just close out of the window and get back to doing what you were doing. If you do have questions, feel free to hang out. You can always email them to me or to your instructor. I'll sit here for the next few minutes while everyone kind of filters out. But I'm happy to take any questions you have. Feel free to just type them in, or if you want, you can click the hand raise button. I'll be happy to hear from you. Yeah, thanks everybody for being here. It was great working with you all today. Thanks, Eric.